Isaiah was a prophet, and that this book started not as a book, it started as a proclamation. The way that prophecy works in the Bible isn't so much most of the time that somebody will come up to you and go, oh, I've got a word, I think God is saying this. They would do like these dramatizations. They would live out the prophecy. And so sometimes when you see Jesus doing crazy things and you don't understand why, it's because he is living out a prophecy. So when Isaiah gave prophetic messages, often they were enacted, they were lived out. He would literally come out and proclaim this to people, and they would be engaging with him in the same way that we are today. So if you've got your Bible, you can find it. It's Isaiah chapter 5, and it's titled The Song About the Vineyard. And so if you imagine Isaiah coming out of the temple, and he's got the crowd, and he pulls everyone around him. He's like, guys, come in, come in, come in. I want to tell you a story. I need to share something with you today. I imagine there's probably this young apprentice guy behind him writing down all of the words, which we've now got today. And what he said is this. He said, I'm going to sing for the one I love a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and cut out a winepress as well. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. So in the original Hebrew, which is what this was written in, the word bad fruit isn't just bad fruit, it's actually a specific type of bad fruit. It's talking about this kind of wild grape. And this grape looks exactly like a normal grape, except when you eat it, it's sour, it's nasty, and you can't digest it. It's inedible. So he's saying that I did everything that I could to look after this vineyard, or my loved one did everything that he could to look after it. He guarded it, he protected it, he nurtured it, but all he got were these wild grapes that looked like what he wanted, and yet were completely different. Now you dwellers in Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard than I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? So he's speaking to this crowd and he's like, look, help me out here. What else could he have done? I mean, he looked after it. He put down the really good fertilizer stuff. He nurtured it. He sang the songs to the grapes that we know singing songs to grapes makes them grow better. He did everything. He gave them cuddles. And Dan told me that this is what he does to his apple trees. He just goes, he cuddles them. He gets his ukulele out. He sings a couple of songs. And then he gets this amazing cider. Like, this guy did all the same things. And he's like, what else could I have done? And the crowd would have been like, nothing. Like, that's actually a little bit more than what we would have done. You did everything right. You should expect to be getting good grapes. It is unreasonable that you're getting these wild, bad grapes. Of course you did everything right. So he then says, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I'll take away the hedge, it will be destroyed. I'll break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, with briars and thorns that will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. And at this moment, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit excessive. Like, when you're starting to command clouds where they're going to rain, like, I think you got a little bit emotionally involved. But his point, I think, is if you've got a vineyard and you've blessed it and there's no fruit, what else are you going to do except abandon it? Of course you're going to leave it. You're not going to keep cultivating something which is just bringing you these wild grapes which aren't edible. I mean, and that's what he's saying. He's saying, is there anything else that he should have done? And the crowd would have been going like, no, this is totally reasonable. Of course you should abandon it. Of course you should leave it. Of course, sell it, do something, but don't keep it. And then he finishes, he says, the vineyard is you. It's like the vineyard is the nation of Israel, the people of Judah, and the vines he delighted in. And I imagine the crowd suddenly being like, oh, what? like suddenly he's called them out. He's like, you are the vineyard. God has blessed you. God has nurtured you. When you were down, he cuddled you and played the ukulele. He's done everything that he could to make you flourish. And he expected these amazing grapes to come from you. And yet all there are these wild, inedible grapes that nobody can do anything with. He says he was looking for justice, but what he saw was bloodshed. For righteousness, but he heard cries of distress. In the original Hebrew, this is like even more rich the way that he says this. He says he was looking for justice. Mishpat is the word. Justice, mishpat. Everyone say mishpat. Mishpat. He was looking for mishpat, but saw bloodshed. Mishpak. Say mishpak. Mishpak. He was looking for righteousness. Say tzedakah. Tzedakah. But heard cries of distress. Say tzedakah. He was looking for mishpat, but he got mishpak. You see, they sound so similar, and yet they're a world apart. Yeah. They're so close, and yet so fundamentally, completely different. And really, I've just got two observations that I took from this. The first thing is that God sows with expectation. He invests in our lives because he expects something to come from that. He pours out into you. He's like, I have loved you, and I expect you to love others. Yeah. I have forgiven you, so I expect you to forgive others. I have welcomed you into my family. I expect you to welcome others. I have poured out lavishness and generosity upon you. I expect you to be generous with others. Yeah. He has sown seeds in your life, and he expects those seeds to flourish. He expects to reap a harvest from what he has sown. And the second thing that I think I see in this is a challenge directly to me. And the challenge is, what kind of fruit am I? What am I? I think that there's two types of fruits in this story, and they look identical, and yet they are completely different. And you can be around people, you can have communities that are set up and they look identical. And yet when you get beneath the surface, they're actually completely different. I wonder, what is the fruit of your life? Does God want love, but all he's sowing is gratification? Maybe God has sown honor, and yet what he sees is pride. Maybe God wants to reap compassion, but we just give pity. I mean, it's so close, and yet it's fundamentally completely different. I was at a conference this week with Rob, and we were chatting, and he was telling me about the difference between bees and wasps. And if you look, I've got a picture of a honeybee and a wasp. These things look so similar, and yet they're fundamentally completely different. Does anybody like bees? No. We had a beehive in my garage. I phoned up the council and I was like, can you sort it out? I can't use my garage anymore. And they were like, no, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but bees take priority over you. And I was like, you're kidding. Like, I've got a swarm of bees in my garage. I want to use it. Like, get rid of them. And they were like, not only will we not remove them, but now we know it's there, we will check that they're still there at the end of the summer. You're not allowed to remove them either. I was like, why is that? And they said it's because bees are so helpful. Bees are like, they're described as a cornerstone species. If you remove bees from an ecosystem, they will transform everything else. All of the different wildlife, the flowers, the trees, they will all suffer because bees don't just take, they give. They give and they take and they bless everything around them. Whereas wasps are gits. Like, let's just be real here. Put your hands up if you like wasps. Yeah, for real, like no one likes wasps. We all hate wasps. Because wasps will sting you just because. They will come, they will fly in your drink, they will drink your drink, they will then fly out of it and they will get a sugar high and they'll just attack you for no reason. Because wasps only think about themselves. You see, they look so similar, and yet the effect that they have on the world is entirely different. In fact, the one question that I have when I get to heaven is to find Noah and be like, dude, really? wasps. You couldn't have just left them off the ark. Like, no one, you would have been a hero. Just drop them. But I wonder whether we're more like bees, who if we left would be missed, who when we come into a room, we're not just coming in for what we can get. And if we don't get it, we're going to cause a fuss. You know, I think churches, it's great to have a bit of buzz, but we need to decide who we're going to be within it. I know, that was my dad joke. I was really looking forward to that one. I was like, if I tell one joke on Sunday, it's going to be about buzzing. That's the only thing that I've got. I went to a church a while ago and I was speaking there. And I turned up and I sat near the front, so I just wanted to sit to the side. And a guy came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Excuse me, this is my seat. You need to move and sit somewhere else." And I was just like, wow, like I can't believe he doesn't know who I am. Not that I'm the visiting speaker. I was like, I'm a newcomer in your church and you basically just told me that I'm not welcome. I've been in another church. I was there for years. And I joined small groups, served on team. I did everything that I could. And honestly, when I left, I realized that nobody would even notice. I did everything that I could to connect, but there was just something I was never quite in. Whatever that needed to happen, I was never one of them. I was always on the outside. There's other churches, we do this in different ways. I know a church where they're so on fire to reach people for God. It's inspiring and it's amazing. And yet when you get to know them, there's a trail of bodies in their wake of people who have been broken and burnt out along the journey. I'm like, it looks so close. And yet there's something fundamentally not right with that. Like surely if we're obsessed with bringing life, we should be experiencing life ourselves. Yeah. I think that as a church, we can be so close. We can be celebrating Jesus and singing amazing songs. We can be welcoming people at the end, and yet we can somehow miss it. And I think that there's three things that really go into a healthy community. And all of these three things, you can get them and you can miss them. And it's like there's a hair's breadth in the middle. And two people can seem to be doing exactly the same thing, and yet the after effect, the culture that they create, the way that people thrive or don't around them is a world apart. I just want to run through these three things pretty quickly, but these are going to be three things that we're going to talk about for the next 20 years. We're going to keep coming back to these. And we're going to say them again and again and again, because I think if we can grow in these are going to become marks of our maturity. These are going to be areas where we can flourish in. And they're simply this. They are to celebrate, to connect, and to contribute. Good. That's what makes a healthy community. Mm-hmm. To celebrate. I love reading the stories of Jesus and seeing the way that people criticized him. And you know what they criticized him more than anything else for? Parties. Yeah. Like, the guy knew how to party. He would go around and they'd be like, what is it? This guy's supposed to be a rabbi. He's supposed to be a prophet. He claims to be like the Son of God, and yet he is just always out with people. He goes crazy. This guy knows how to party. And it got the religious guys really, really mad. And they started asking, how come, they're fasting, and you guys, you're just knocking back the wine, you're eating all of this amazing bread, you've got the good steak, not kind of like you're just loving life, you're partying. And Jesus actually explains it to them. He says, well, the reason why other people are fasting and we're celebrating is because I am here. Which is a really arrogant thing to say. Could you imagine, like, oh, the reason why we have a party everywhere is because we love me. But that's what he says. He says, I'm here with my people. But why wouldn't we celebrate? We're celebrating my presence. Like, this is mind-blowing. He basically says, where I am, there should be a party. How amazing is this? This is why we get so excited at church to have fun. We're like, church should be the most fun place that there is to go, because Jesus is here in the midst of his people. We should be known as people who know how to party. We should be known as people who know how to celebrate, who know how to have fun. There's another story that Jesus told. He told the story, it's a really, really famous one, about two brothers and a dad, and one of the brothers says, I want my inheritance now. So he takes his inheritance from his dad, which is just so rude. And he goes off and he's partying. He's having like amazing time and the money runs out. And then he realizes like he has just spent all of his money on himself. He has partied himself to the bone and now he's broke. All of his friends have left him. He's got nowhere to go. And he decides he's going to come back home to his dad. And his dad rushes out and welcomes him. But what strikes me about this is the moment his dad welcomes him home, what's the first thing he does? He throws a party. He throws a celebration. You see, the idea for us of celebrating is all upward. It's when we realize what God has done, we have to celebrate. Yeah. You know, it doesn't matter about our circumstances and situations. It doesn't matter whether I get the promotion or not. I'm still going to celebrate because I realize that God has done so much already. He has moved in incredible. He doesn't need to do anything else. And I should be permanently celebrating that I get to have a relationship with the one who created the universe. That I get to be made right and that there's nothing that I could have done. It was done for me. And so I get to celebrate in everything. That's why we get so excited when people come here. And they're like, yeah, I want to follow Jesus. You know, that gives us a buzz because we get so excited to see people come home. That's what we celebrate. But there's another brother in the story as well, and he's not in the party. And he's outside, and he's grumpy, and he's frustrated. And the reason why he's frustrated is because he's saying, well, look at me. I did everything right. I did everything that I was supposed to do. I lived a good life. I stayed here. I did the farming. I didn't mess up. Why aren't you celebrating me? And I think that this is the key decision that we need to make when we walk into a room. Are we going to be people who come to celebrate or to be celebrated? Wow. If you come and you're looking to be celebrated, you will always be frustrated. Because the celebration will always lead you in a direction. You will always be chasing the applause of people around you. Because you've come to be celebrated. And when they're not celebrating you, you'll be frustrated. And you'll go, well, they don't like me. They don't care about me. I'm not valued enough here, so I need to go. They didn't see the thing that I did. I served and nobody mentioned it. I've been here doing everything right. And when you're constantly comparing, it only leads you to despair. There's no quicker way to destroy something that's good than to compare it with somebody else's stuff. We do it all the time. Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is that you use, we look and we're like, well, if only my life was more like theirs. If only I had their recognition. If only I had their platform. If only people noticed me in that way. If only I had their husband or their wife. If only I had their career. And that mentality will drive you mad. Yeah. Because you will never be grateful. Listening to a speaker a while ago and he was saying, never be satisfied. Keep pushing. Never be satisfied. Never stop. There's always more. There's always more. There's always more. And we can do this in church. There's no better way to get a crowd excited than to stand up and preach and go, there's more, there's more, there's more. And that's great until it leads us to no longer being satisfied with what God has already done. Wow. We need to be able to look at what we have and say, this is enough. I can celebrate what God has already given me. He has already poured out an abundance. You see, this is why I come to church every single Sunday. It's not this legalistic, I have to be here. I want to be in an environment of celebration because that changes the way that I live my life. Yeah. I stop making it all about me and I start celebrating God in every single area that I go to. So the first thing that we can grow in is in celebration. Learning to celebrate others and not always needing to be the one who's celebrated. The second one is connection. I love hearing how people find their way back to God. I love those stories. They're my favorite. And I was listening to somebody share theirs a little while ago, and he was explaining that for him, Some of the key moments, they weren't the worship time, although he said that the worship time was good. He said it wasn't the sermons. I said I beg to disagree. But he was adamant that it wasn't. He said it was this one moment. He said, well, we were told to connect with people around us and to chat about a question. And he said, I was sitting alone and somebody crossed over an aisle to come and sit next to me. And he said, that simple act of love showed me more about the gospel than anything else. It blew me away. It blew me away. I think that I spend so much time thinking about who I can be connected to. And what I kind of think is that maybe if I'm surrounded by friends, then I've got it all together. And we think that's what security is, isn't it? We think, I'm secure if I've got all of my people around me. But I think that the truth is that security is actually when you can leave those people and cross the room for somebody who's got nobody.
Yeah.
We need to be the kind of people who are looking and saying not just, who am I connecting to, but who are they connecting to? How can I be a connection creator? I spoke about this church where I failed to connect, and I think so much of the time it's like we want to be in the in crowd, but the problem with being in the in crowd is that there's an out crowd. That there's people who aren't going to be in it, that we create these bubbles and these cliques. And it's because we want to feel like we love people, we want to feel like we really know people. And yet if it comes at the expense of others, then it's not what we really want. It's like it looks so close, and yet it's fundamentally different. And I think as well, we think that being a welcoming church is enough. But if you're welcoming someone just because it's their first week and never welcoming them into your home, never welcoming them into your life, that is not what it means to be welcoming.
That's right.
That just means you know how to get somebody to come back for a second week. That's all that it means. We need to be welcomers.
Yeah.
We need to be connectors. And that's not always going to happen here on a Sunday morning. It's why we're making such a fuss about connect groups. Because these are places where you can have those deeper relationships, where you really can pray for people. If you don't turn up here on a Sunday, I'll be honest, we might not always notice. And as we keep growing every single week, it's going to be harder and harder to notice every single time. You need people who are going to notice. You need people who you are going to notice when they're not right, when they're not here, who you are looking out for as well. That's what connection is. It's not just about you. We connect for the sake of others because we want to be that kind of sticky community who authentically love. I love the way that Paul talks about it in Corinthians. He's like, you can have all the gifts. You can prophesy, speak in the tongues of angels. You can be like that power preacher. You can be the person who prays every single time, they're always healed. You can be amazing, but if you do not have love, it is empty. None of it matters. I want to tell you today, if you come here, it doesn't matter how much competence you've got. It doesn't matter how amazingly gifted you are. If you don't love, it will never lead to anything good. You will always just be buzzing and you will never make that impact. The third C is to contribute. We need to be people who celebrate other people. We want to clap for somebody else's wins. We want to celebrate what's happening in other people's lives. We need to be people who connect. Like Sundays isn't enough. That's not community. I had a guy who I knew was a Muslim, and he became a Christian. And he was going to church every single day, and somebody asked him, are you happy that you became a Christian? And he's like, well, I believe in Jesus and I believe in God. He said, I just feel like I gave up my community for a bunch of meetings. And I was like, wow. Are we connecting? Are we a community? Or are we just a bunch of meetings? We need to have authentic community. Lives shared. But we also need to contribute. I love Christmas.
Yay.
I disagree with Daniel. I think that Christmas should only be a week, not 6 months. But I love it. I absolutely love it. My favorite part of Christmas is the food. I love the family around the dinner table, the turkey, the sausage and blankets. Why do we restrict that to one day a year?
We do.
I don't know. Let's bring that out again and again. The stuffing, the bread pudding stuff.
pigs in blankets every week.
I'm getting attacked by the vegans. We can have Brussels sprouts as well. But really, it's not about the food, it's about the family.
Yeah.
It's about us all being together. And what I love is that when you're there and it's right, you've got somebody who's been cooking or some buddies who have been cooking. You know, you've got somebody who's carving up the meat or carving up the nut roast, thank you. You've got somebody who's dishing it out, somebody who's tidying and cleaning, somebody's looking after the kids and entertaining. It's like everybody's got a role. Everybody is involved. Why? Because we set up a rota? No. Because we're family. You know, that's what family does, isn't it? It would be awkward if you were the one who was just sitting at the table being like, family, serve me. It's all about me today. Thank you. Can you get me some of that? Can you do that would be awkward. We would say something to you, wouldn't we? We wouldn't have that. We'd just drop some plates in your lap and say, go sort it out. Get cleaning. Because we all chip in. That's family. I don't know how to turn this off. The guy whose phone it is playing guitar. Let's try that. But family gets stuck in. That's what we do. We contribute. If you're part of a community and you're not contributing, I want to tell you, you're not actually part of that community. You're just an attender. There's a big difference between family and a crowd. And they look the same. There's a lot of bodies there together in one place, but the spirit is completely different. I was talking to some other leaders this week and we were talking about this, and I want to tell you, you guys are amazing. You guys are absolutely amazing. We're saying how many people get involved at your church. And I was doing the maths and I was like everyone. Like almost everyone. Like just if you have contributed in however you understand that to be, maybe you've been serving on a team, maybe you've been leading a small group, maybe you've been going out there sharing about Jesus to people and telling them, look, come to church, come be part of this. If you have contributed to this community in the last 6 months, just raise a hand. It's like everyone. You know, we're never going to be the kind of church where it's just like a couple of people are here trying to serve you all. We're not going to do that. Not only because I'm just too much of a poor human being to be able to do that, but because we don't want that for each other. That's not family. That's rubbish. We contribute. We get involved. We help each other out. I want to contribute to the mission of this church. I want to reach people and welcome them in. I get excited for that. I want to contribute my time and my gifts. Honestly, if I can do it, I want to help. I contribute with my finances and my resources because I know that this stuff just doesn't happen. I don't think that the reason why we put on church is just so that we can be fed. I don't think that's it. I think that the reason why we put on church is because we get to be part of something together. We get to be family. And sometimes that's scary, sometimes that's difficult, sometimes you contributing might look like taking some time out to look after yourself. Sometimes contribution looks like protecting yourself from being burnt out, like that's okay. I don't want you to hear something I'm not saying in this. But the heart of it, the heart of all of these, is that we is greater than me. That my life is bigger than just myself. I don't want to be in here just getting what I want from myself, and when it doesn't go my way, I get angry and try and sting people. They describe bees as being like super organisms, because if you take bees out, everything else falls apart. That's what church should be in a community. You know, we should be that super organism where when you remove us, Stockport falls apart. Yeah. Lives can't function because we are living in a different way. And this is true for us here, but we can take this outside too. When we're at school, when we're at work, when we're in our neighborhood. We just celebrate people. Hey mate, you're smashing it. Hey, you're amazing. I love the way you're raising your kids. Like, that is so good. We just celebrate other people because that's become our culture. You know, we get to be people who can go and just say, look, how can I help? Hey, let me help you with that. How refreshing would that be? And we'll create a culture of celebration. We create a culture of connection. We create a culture of contribution. And I think that when we do that, we create a healthy culture where everybody gets to thrive and everybody gets to flourish.